I'm Yo-Yo.
And I'm Katia. Welcome to our podcast.
Each week we learn from the experts about all things women's health and happiness.
We are two very normal, imperfect women.
Navigating this crazy thing called life.
And trying to stay happy and healthy while we do it. So, grab a cuppa.
Or tidy away that pile of laundry.
And enjoy our discoveries. Hello and welcome.
Hello, welcome to episode 54.
Yes, we are on 54. And well, this episode is a really interesting one. It's interesting for everybody. It's not just women's focused.
It's definitely not a women only episode today. It is everyone, because it's all about biodiversity of plants surrounding us and how that affects our health.
Yes, but we have the best guest to talk us through this.
Yes, so Professor Kathy Willis, she has a CBE, or is a CBE? How do you say this?
She's been awarded a CBE.
Yeah, awarded
so she's
a CBE.
Of the British Empire.
She is also a Professor of Biodiversity in the Department of Biology and the Principal of St Edmund's Hall at the University of Oxford.
Yes, and she's also a crossbench peer in the House of Lords, with her previous roles including Director of Science at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew, and she's a member of the UK government's Natural Climate Capital Committee.
Yes.
Sorry.
No,
blah.
It's a mouthful, but it's so impressive.
Yeah.
So impressive. And Kathy has recently written a fascinating book called Good Nature. And the tagline is The New Science of How Nature Improves Our Health. And this is just filled with science, isn't it? But written in a lovely way that anyone can read it.
Yeah, this is going to be on, I've said in the episode, it's on a lot of my Christmas gift list, this book, because it is filled with science, but in a way of she's the perfect person to pull science with everyday life, and how we all can do it. And she is one of these people who I flew through this book reading it. Yeah. There's a lot of science in there in terms of studies and research, which has to be there to show the clinical evidence, or the evidence surrounding what she's trying to hypothesize, but but then she translates it into really actionable things that we can do, and it's not like actionable things that are available only to people who live in the deepest, darkest countryside. It's people with money.
Yeah, it's not like you have to be rich. This is like a special extra thing on top of a life. Actually, there's these little tips anyone could do in their homes, even if you live in urban environments.
And how those tips will massively affect your health. Like some of these things are just the things with the immune cells and the T cell, the
cancer fighting killer T cells or something.
And even just simple things like, you know, we all know the link of there's so many products sold to us about lavender and sleeping it better at night, and actually why it helps us sleep better at night. It's nothing to do with our granny's perfume. Yes. But it's like the science behind what it does in our body to help us sleep at night and sleep deeper. So Anyway,
so with that, we're going on to like lots of spoilering everything in here, but this is one of my favorite episodes, I think. I say that a lot, but it's so different because she's the first expert talking about this topic really properly. So really interesting. One little thing to say is that it's currently Bring Your Child to Work Day.
One thing involves me. I'm like, what are we saying? So I have my little girl Edie is here in the studio with us, and she's just having the best time because she's just been allowed to have the little tablet where she can play games for a bit of time. But anyone who's going through that September school work-life balance, I have my
transition to school. So the first couple of weeks, there's a lot of like settling in days and days where your child is not at school, and somehow you're supposed to do your work anyway.
Yes, and today was definitely a clash of who was looking after Edie. No, but it was both in the diary. Then Neil's, had to go away, so. Yeah, Edie's with us, and she's been really good. But she may come in, and you may hear her in the background singing at one point.
Might be some lovely little.
At one point, I have to lift my headphones, and you might notice it. And I was trying to see if she's okay, but she was just singing along to something. So
she's been absolutely amazing. But if you hear the door opening and closing, you might it's just because
it was a little knock at one point. Yeah, because Octonauts was not on the right frame.
Oh no,
I was like, Edie, darling, this isn't important. You could still watch it.
Anyway, well, that said, We really hope you enjoy this episode. I'm pretty sure you will, and I'm pretty sure there'll be some amazing bits of inspiration you'll take away from this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
on cue, there's some singing.
On cue, some singing outside.
I enjoy this episode.
Enjoy. Hello, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm so excited for this conversation because you are an expert about a topic that we really haven't yet covered. Isn't that right?
No, not at all. But also one that I'm really excited about because, I love everything to do with what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. So let's dive straight in.
Brilliant. So absolutely.
Botanical sciences, all biology, all the stuff that you do. So first of all, I want to ask, what inspired you to write your brilliant book, Good Nature, which is all about the science behind the effects that plants have on us? Could you talk us through?
Yeah, well, I mean, it came about because quite a few years ago now, I was doing some work for a large government project, an international government project, looking at the benefits we get from nature, like, carbon drawdown and clean water and fresh air. And I kept coming across this study that was published in Science in 1984, a long time ago, which showed that people who looked out of a hospital window onto green recovered much faster and had less pain relief drugs than people who looked out onto a brick wall. And I was just really intrigued by this because what it was saying was the plants didn't have to be in the room, and you didn't have to smell them or anything. It was just being able to see them that was triggering some sort of action, some sort of change in the body that was then bringing about a faster recovery rate. And so that direct interaction between the sense of sight and physical and mental well-being was, I wanted to understand then, okay, so what else do we know about this? And that started a whole new pathway of sort of research and also finding all the evidence that's out there to say, is this just voodoo science? Is it just, it's all quite nice? Or is there really a scientific evidence base underneath this that interacting with plants really does improve our health?
Amazing. Yes. And what did you find? Is there real evidence?
There's a huge evidence base. And actually, for me, one of the things where I'm really interested right now in what's going on in terms of all of the excellent work going on. So we need to eat more plants, because they'll improve our health and everything else, and 30 plants a week or even a day, I can't remember. But the point being actually that many of those health benefits, plus many, many more, we get from interacting with nature. And so it's not eating the plants that we ought to be worrying about. It's about actually being surrounded by plants, spending in whatever way you can in your home, in your park, in your walk to work, because the evidence base, the clinical evidence base, and most of these studies are published in places like, top medical journals like the Lancet. They're showing in the clinical studies that when we interact our senses, smell, sight, sound, touch, with nature, it triggers all these pathways in our bodies that bring about physiological changes of calming. It brings about changes in our mind. Our sort of mental well-being is greatly enhanced, but it also changes some of the metabolic processes in our bodies, and it acts in the same way for some cases as taking a prescription drug. That to me is just incredible.
Because you do dive into quite a lot of this in your book, in the fact that even just things like you go through like the sight and how it works and how it changes, and then your scent, how you smell. And even in there you say, like, when you talk about citrus, about how, in future years we could all just be on like smelling citrus because the effects are so profound that it actually has this medical benefits to us.
So citrus is a really interesting one. So the smell you get from plants is this, they're called volatile organic compounds. They're these, basically it's the compound, when it's released, it immediately comes out as a gas. So that's the scent you pick up. And with citrus, they've shown not only when you smell, is limonene, which is the compound. When you smell it, it lowers your heart rate. It makes you it makes you relaxed, but also it has anti-inflammatory properties and can reduce inflammation. They've shown anyway in clinical studies, it can reduce inflammation in the lung. And now it's a long way off from saying, okay, that we should all be inhaling lemon.
Yeah.
But when you read the evidence base around limonene, you start thinking, right, I'm going to cut up lemons, I'm going to have lemons in my home, I'm going to, and in some ways, you think about how many products are lemon scented, like soap, for example. So you could have a small change. You could buy lemon scented soap, and by doing that, that smell will, every time you wash your hands, will just trigger a certain amount of automatic calming in your body. These are automatic reactions, and they're not linked to, my grandmother used to make, lemon souffle, and therefore I have a happy memory, and therefore there's a sort of clinical evidence for real triggering changes happening in our bodies when we smell these compounds.
Wow. But it's like, the thing about your book is that there's loads of things like this. It's not just like one small thing and like, we'd attribute like to lemon. But the research you find is obviously research that may have been done quite a while ago and has been lost. Like, I found this study, and it's kind of like, it's quite surprising, don't you think? And it's actually a lot more people. Is it because people kind of, yes, we know that plants are good for us, but we don't need to go any further with it? Because there's not a lot of newer research out there.
I think, well, there's two things I found really fascinating. So the one area where people are actively prescribing nature now, it's the Japanese forest bathing called Shirin-ryoku, I think it is. I can't remember that. I think that's the term they use. And there they prescribe people to go and sit for 2 hours a week or every other day in the forest. And this is they have a medical center for this in a number in Japan. They sit in the forest because it is better than prescribing prescription drugs for certain things. So this evidence base is building up, but what's happening, and we're coming back to your point, is that first of all, you have to go and physically sit in a forest. So you need to, spend 2 hours getting there. Most people, get real. We've all got really horribly busy lives, and we live in urban areas. So it's where I think we need to be joining it up now is to say, can you get those same effects from interacting with nature in a city, in your home, in your school, in your workplace? And that's where I think the evidence base, it started in the 1980s, but it's absolutely cranking up. And the reason it's cranking up, which I think is very, very interesting, is a lot of studies now being done on like whole population studies. There was one came out last year that they looked at the Welsh population over the last 10 years. And they took all their medical records for, I think it was, I was just going to check the number of people here. It was 3 million adults. So this is a big population size. This is not just a little few people in a room. So I looked at the mental health records of 3 million people over 10 years. And they mapped how close those people lived to green space. And those people, for every 350 meters you are further away from green space, your mental health is worse.
Wow.
So there's a really strong, and then the really interesting thing also is that the positive effects on mental health were enhanced in those quintiles, those areas that people are poorer. So to me, it's nothing to do with, rich people live in their green spaces and therefore that's all to do with, their own, there's socioeconomic factors in there. In fact, it's the other way around. And so this is why I'm coming back to, one of the big problems with telling people to eat more plants is if you're really, if poverty is an issue, it can become a really difficult thing to have these entirely plant-based, lovely organic meals. But green space and interaction with green space, you get this huge boost in terms of green health, and particularly for those lower quintiles, those lower economic quintiles. So these really big population studies are showing this, but all of this it's a correlation. It's not telling what the causation is. And so now the task is on, and what I tried to do in Good Nature was to say what studies are hinting at what the causation could be for that.
Yeah. Okay, and in there you've very systematically gone through every single sense. So I think there's a chapter on the smell, chapter on sight, and chapter on touch. So yeah, within that, it'd be interesting to hear what is the most surprising mechanism that you've
Can I have two?
You've found. Okay, yes.
Okay, well the first one was the smell chapter, because I often thought of smell as just being quite nice. It's nice to have a smell of lemons or whatever. What I hadn't appreciated was that when you smell a plant smell, and they've shown this, people who walk in a pine forest, and they measured their they measure the sort of smell, they measure the compounds in the air in the pine forest, and they measure these people's blood and look for the pinene compound in their blood before they walked. It was really low. After these people had done a 2-hour walk, they measured their blood again, huge peak of pinene in their blood. Wow. So what happens is when you breathe the smell in, it passes across your lung membrane into your blood, or some of these compounds too. And there it interacts and triggers all these metabolic processes that we don't quite understand yet, but the outcomes are really remarkable. So, there was the lovely example where people walked in cypress forest in Japan, and this was published in a top cancer biology journal 3 years ago. And they were, after walking in this cypress forest for 2 hours, they had really high levels of natural killer cells in their blood. And natural killer cells are the cells that attack cancers and viruses. We all want elevated levels of those in our blood. And not only that, that 2-hour walk, that benefit lasted for 7 days. Wow. So, okay, maybe we can't go and walk in the forest, but we can diffuse the smell of that oil in our homes. Yeah. So that was, for me, that was like a really, and then another study where they had people in bedrooms and they puffed out the same oil, and they saw a really big drop in their adrenaline hormone. So you have all of these things going on.
Wow, so the same pine forest smell had an effect on adrenaline.
Yeah, this one was this was cypress forest, Cupressaceae, but in the same conifer family. Yeah, so conifer families. If you're going to go walking, in a park, go and find the area with the conifer trees, because you'll get more benefits from walking there from smell than you will from walking in an area that's got a lot of deciduous trees in it, and not the herbs and things.
Very interesting. And actually that relates very much to a stress question I was going to ask in a few moments. So stress is a huge part of a lot of people's daily life now. What I'm hearing from you is one action point is find conifer trees.
Yes. Yeah.
or diffuse the smell into your house somehow. Is there any other research that relates to stress and the effect of plants around us?
Well, with actually almost every single interaction with plants, sight, sound, smell, touch, all of them indicate a reduction. Either it'll be a reduction in your heart rate variability, you'll get an elevated parasympathetic response, which is the one you get when you're calmer. Your brainwave activity will show enhanced brainwaves in the areas that mean that you are clinically calmer. Mentally, all the evidence shows that, so I'd say all of those different senses in themselves trigger a reduction in stress. And also, even looking out a window onto a green landscape rather than a brick wall, there's some lovely experiments where, you stress someone by giving them an electric shock, a mild one, but not an experiment I would personally take part in. But what they've shown, and the other one they do, the other test, which I think is even meaner, is they ask people to do to repeat a sequence of numbers backwards. And every time they get it wrong, they will press a buzzer. Now, what they actually do is they press a buzzer even if they don't get it wrong, so that it really elevates your stress levels. Can you imagine? It's like, the worst. And what they showed was that, so they then looked at the recovery rate from that stress, and those people who then looked out onto a green wall or a green landscape versus those people who looked onto an urban landscape or out the office window, those people who looked onto the green recovered much quicker from the stress. The stress levels came down much quicker than those that looked out onto the brick wall. So I think that is a really, really interesting. If you're really stressed at work, there's a very quick thing you can do, which is just looking out the window.
Yes.
But if I can just go back to because I still want my second top fact.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yes. Yeah.
Please do. Yes.
But the really, really fascinating thing, I knew none of this, is to do with the environmental microbiome. So we hear a lot about our gut microbiome and how we need to make it much more diverse and bring in the bacteria that are really good for us, because they trigger all these other gut-brain axis things that are incredibly important for our health. And what I hadn't realised is that the natural biodiverse areas, even certain house plants, they they pass on their microbiome to us. So our
Oh,
gut adopts the microbiome of the environment we're in. And I think the lovely study, and I know you've got children, and many people will have small children, is they had a beautiful study published a couple of years ago in one of the top science journals. They dealt with children, the age, so 18-month-old children, 80 of them, in Finland. And they had one group just played in a normal kindergarten playground, like with concrete. One group had matting, normal plastic matting. The third group, they brought in soil from the boreal forest, and they played with the dirt, basically. And they measured their poo. They measured the diversity of the gut flora in the poo. After 28 days, those children that played in the soil had a totally different gut flora. Really biodiverse, much more, the sort you want by taking or by drinking probiotics. But even more interestingly, when they looked at their bloods and looked at the different inflammatory markers in their bloods, those children that are played in the soil had much lower, statistically significant lower inflammatory markers.
wow.
So that link, we know there's a link between gut flora and inflammatory markers, but just by interacting with a different environment and a more biodiverse environment, you can trigger these changes. And the same results was shown with people, adults working in office. A group who had they put a green wall in their office, so it was a wall covered in plants, versus those that didn't have a green wall also had this effect that your body adopts the signature provided by the plants. So it's another
Amazing.
way, and so to me that was just extraordinary. And we spend a lot of time coming back to what we eat, how we change our gut flora. Yes, I'm well with those studies, but there's another way of doing this, which is by interacting with nature.
Yeah,
Wow,
fantastic.
it's phenomenal. And it's all phenomenal. The fact it's not just like an anecdotal saying; it's all science. It's all in your blood. It's all measured.
Yeah.
And the thing I was kept thinking about when in your book is you were saying that people who have this green landscape at work, and I was thinking back to all my offices I've been in, and loads of the windows were high up. So you couldn't actually see anything, all you saw was cloud.
Yeah.
And even these, and I'm like, we never had any plants. I was like, plants would have made that, and a green wall would have been incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, then that's not that hard for a company to put in.
Yeah,
No,
and it has to be, and the science is helping perhaps state the case, the kind of cost scenario, whereas it's worth investing some money into this because it will make all the workers and employees healthier and happier in the long run. With fewer sick days if you have a more diverse microbiome. Yeah, and also I'm thinking, so nursery is on our mind because we have young children.
Yes.
This is a very good evidence for convincing nurseries to go for grass rather than AstroTurf. Isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the bacterial load on these different things, or people have been doing this recently, grass is great, but even better is having sort of this organic soil, having different heights and shapes of vegetation around there.
Yeah.
Children playing in dirt. Now, obviously, organic soil and in the garden, we're so conscious about, and we've become so sort of, it's this hygiene hypothesis. And people are now starting to say, this in itself can trigger, real problems further forwards in terms of allergies and stuff. And to me, this is some of the most convincing evidence I've ever come across to show that this is, and these are double blind, everything, the right sort of clinical tests that you need in order to say, look, this is a real change that's happening. And it doesn't take much. So even in classrooms, I know schools are so strapped for cash, but children can do planting experiments in a classroom. They can play with soil. When we garden, we don't have to wear gloves. They're small things, but they can make, so you can wait for someone else to tell you what to do, or you can embrace them yourself now. And that's, writing this book has really done that to me, where I started off being quite scientific, thinking, this is this chapter. And by the end, my study at home, I'm at work right now, but my study at home is like jam-packed with plants. And I have diffusers here and there and everything else. And but I feel better for it. And lots of people come to the house, they say, gosh, your study's beautiful. And I thought it's not changed other than I now have plants hanging from every wall. So, and these are cheap plants. These are not, really expensive, exotic things.
And the thing with the house plants like that, like you can't, they can be cost effective, because I have a Swiss cheese plant that I have probably propagated because it's grown so big, like 5 times. So it now has 5 babies, like, that are now growing like crazy, because it's like everywhere. I'm like, Neil's like, can we get another diverse plant other than this one?
But well, speaking of plant diversity, so for houseplants, say, do the different types have different effects, or should you have is it okay just to have cheese plants everywhere? Because we're the same. We have lots of cheese plants.
They just grow so quickly.
But should we have a more diversity, or which one should we focus on?
Diversity of shape and colour is good, just because I think what happens when we look at green is that our eyes don't really focus in. It's more the overall shape, and that's what seems to the sort of psychological theories. That's why it gives us sort of a mental mini break when we look at green. And then when we go back to another task, we can be much more focused because we've given our focused attention a bit of a break. So the studies show that actually colour does matter. So with leaves, it's this sort of the white and green leaves and the white and yellow leaves have the biggest effect on brainwave activity. Who would know? And it's yellow and white flowers as well. So whereas red flowers or red leaves, most times of the year, the psychological metrics show they invoke feelings of tension and anger.
Oh,
so you think about poinsettias.
Oh,
Christmas,
yeah.
whoa, hang on,
like
get that off the Christmas table quick. But having said that, we have to be quite careful, because with colour, there can be quite important cultural differences, which are on top of this sort of this layer of psychological data, and also even studies done on a group of students in North America where they mapped their preference for colour over the year, and when you get to autumn, people actually like reds. And so there is a sort of trigger in there, because it didn't make sense to me. If red really does invoke anger, why are we all flocking out to see, to New England in the autumn to see the autumn leaves, or in Japan or wherever? But no one's really taken it the next stage on to say, does our psychological and physiological metrics change with seasons as well with these colours? So there's not the work done yet, but I certainly won't have poinsettia anymore.
We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We'd love to help more women out there, so please subscribe, rate and review, which helps more people find us. And share this episode with any friends who you think will enjoy it too. Thank you. Without further ado, here's the rest of the episode. So the poinsettia, I found recently, the reason it's red is because it's grown in the dark. And that's what makes its leaf red. So it probably doesn't actually want to be red.
No.
It wants to be green. So that's probably why we're all like...
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it goes red when it's grown in the dark. So if it's in the light, it goes...
Triggered.
It goes...
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know, but it's probably a forest floor species. So some forest floor species have, it's the amount of light that's going to be coming through, and therefore their leaves become darker and redder. But they do, plants, as we all know, they're very plastic. They're quite fickle. And that's what I love about plants. They can sort of change shape a bit or change colour or whatever to adapt to the environment. Some animals do it as well, but plants are really good at this.
Yeah. Yes, I love the concept of plants taking over. I always think of like when if something would happen to the human race, all our plants would just slowly keep growing and just start to demolish all the buildings.
That's depressing.
No, I know, but I just think plants are so strong.
Oh, so they'll keep going away after us.
They adapt, and we have this. I think it's a cheese plant. Do you know how they grow like long tendrils to soak up moisture from the air?
Yeah.
And sometimes if we've left them for a bit too long, they've kind of gone along our wooden table surface and literally started like
bedding
into the wood. So I love that. So.
Yeah.
I see.
They do that. Yeah.
I find working with plants. I've worked with it for like 35 years in my career. I just find them really positive organisms to work on, because actually plants have been around for 350 million years. And as you say, are now well before we came, we arrived on planet Earth. But their plants have always responded to, and helped, even at the big scale, helped balance the global atmospheric patterns. Really high levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. You got a big expansion of those plants that then sort of sucked it up, and then it got deposited, so your CO2 comes back down again. And I find that just reassuring that plants will just always somehow they will adapt and keep going as long as we don't remove absolutely every last trace of like the seed bank or whatever. But you think about Chernobyl, that terrible, terrible disaster.
Yeah.
And yet those areas now have got, covered in vegetation. Now, we can't go there because that vegetation has, it's adopted and it has got a lot of this sort of the radioactive material. It's not safe for us. But plants are back there. They're breaking those soils down again. They're starting that ecosystem. And for me, one of the things where we go really wrong is we often think of ourselves as outside of the ecosystem, like the sort of, the mighty ruler, and nature is sort of there to be moved and affected to our requirements. But what it's actually doing is the other way around. We are part of the ecosystem, and we need to learn to live and embrace those aspects of the ecosystem that are so important. I mean, the beauty of it, and the encouraging thing, is that plants have carried on, and they're sort of taking over again. And I think this is one of the issues that we always, or many people, think of, us as the sort of the mighty person managing the ecosystem, and that humans aren't part of the ecosystem, but we absolutely are a cog in the ecosystem. And we need to be working with other parts of that ecosystem, in this case plants, to get the benefits. But it's not using them in a particular way. It's sort of thinking about how we interact and how we manage nature in order to enhance it, because it then provides these benefits. And I think, to me, that's a very different way of thinking about it. And I used to do this in my lecturing to my students, and I'd say, do very normal biodiversity type lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, I'd say, put your hand up if you think we are part of the ecosystem, or put your hand up if you think we are outside of the ecosystem. And it was always split, because a lot of people tend to think of, nature is there and this is my life. And we absolutely need to think about, we often think about food and nature and what we're eating, but we don't think about nature around us. And that also being, it's not there to just provide a service for what we eat, but actually also it's incredibly important for our health.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. Absolutely. It makes me feel so fortunate to live near places where there is greenery.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that live in a very urban environment.
Yeah. And this, to me, is one of the really crucial things. So first of all, sort of access to green space is coming into policy, both UK and internationally. Everyone should be 15 minutes away from green space. That is a sort of a commitment in international policy and also in the UK. But then what are you going to put in that green space? When you talk about green space, is it just a flat football pitch? Or is it a green space where you get all these sort of different biodiversity? You hear bird song, you're able to touch, smell, see different aspects of nature. And that's the sort of green space we need. And if you can't have access to it outdoors, then we need to bring it indoors. And this comes back to these simple things that we can do in schools, in offices, in hospitals, to actually bring those benefits and create an ecosystem inside, really. And that's where we need to be thinking, rather than seeing it as something completely separate.
Especially hospitals, actually.
Yeah.
Because if I think of hospital, that's like the most clinical, clean type of place I know.
Yeah.
And actually considering it affects the blood and healing and well-being, if someone's in hospital for a long time.
Yeah.
And diffusers in hospital.
Yeah, that's so easy. Yeah.
So it is interesting. So the National Health Service are onto this. I mean, they are starting to create a network of garden hospitals, and it comes back to, what do you put in the garden hospitals? What do you put in your corridors? What do you put in your wards? Now, there will be some things that some plants, and this comes back to this point, not all nature is equal. There will be some things which are, high in allergenics. There'll be some things which aren't good. So it's knowing what is going to work. But the hospital gardens in particular, it's thinking about what you put in them to ensure that when people go there, they get maximum physiological and psychological relaxation when they, so let's put scented plants, let's put lavender in there, let's put, all these different things that we know do bring about calming.
Wow.
You can sometimes see the NASA air quality things, and it kind of touched on, that plants, obviously clean the air, the CO2, and they bring it all back down. But is that, if you put them in your home, does it have a great effect? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Does it actually have an effect?
It's again, I mean, this is what I was saying about the smell chapter, but also when one of the last chapters is, what do you do? And they've looked at these things called active green walls. So if you put a green wall in a classroom, they've done this in classrooms, a number of studies in China, but also in Australia, where you put this green wall in, and what it does, it has a little pump at the bottom that sucks the air from the room and just passes it over the leaves. And they found a 70% reduction in particulates, both those, so the actual sort of small particles that you get in the air, but also the chemical organic compounds in the air, which you don't want. 70% reduction in about 15 minutes.
That's 15.
So it cleans the air. So the plants are cleaning the air.
Wow.
I mean, I ought to add a word of caution here, because people say, "Oh, we need more street trees. We must, put trees everywhere." The problem is plants can also trap the pollution in a street. So you can get, yes, some street trees are great and they're great for other health benefits, but we have to be very careful about the physical action of a tree in a street. If you have a very narrow, almost like a canyon type street, and then you put trees in there, the trees basically keep the pollution in. So you also want to bear those things in mind.
Yes.
So and it comes back to really knowing or understanding what you're doing and what you're effectively, what ecosystem you need to be building and working with in order to get those benefits to come about.
Interesting. So it's not a chemical action of the trees, but it's the physical mass of the trees that is
those tree tunnels that I love
the
driving
air.
down.
It traps, and so there's lots of people say areas that have more trees reduce childhood asthma. Well, the big meta-analysis they've done on all the data on that is that the evidence is not strong. It's not strong. So you absolutely need to reduce pollutants in streets. That there is a direct link between that and childhood asthma, no question about that.
Yeah, so you
but
can't
the idea that your solution is to put trees is not that one. You've got to be careful of, because the evidence base on that is not convincing actually. And it's the same with people saying, "Oh, the reason that people are healthier when there's more green space is because there's less obesity and because people can exercise more." Again, when you do the meta-analysis where they've looked at many, many studies and looked at the data, there's not a strong relationship. It's not that people do more exercise in areas you've got greater green space. That therefore leads to people being healthier. It has to be something to do with all these benefits, physiological benefits and psychological benefits that are directly related to our senses interacting with nature, and that triggers these automatic changes in our bodies that we really have nothing to do with. It happens. And smell is a really interesting one, because lavender and limonene, the citrus one, people say, "Oh, well, it goes back to my grandmother and I have happy memories." And they tried the smell out on 8-week-old babies. Will have no memory of their grandmother or even their mother, and they still got a lower a reduction in their heartbeat when they smelled this smell.
Wow,
that's amazing. Yeah.
So it is this automatic process that happens, or triggers these automatic processes.
So this really makes me want to use diffusers at home. But is there any caution that we need to use if we have like essential oils of lavender or limonene? Or
I think the caution. I mean, the evidence, the levels people have been using and testing people on are the ones that we get in the ambient air. So the top levels of pinene in the air. Now, if you put your face over a diffuser and start inhaling pinene sort of mass amounts, I don't know. I wouldn't go. I cannot, and I would not suggest you do that. But you think about how many diffusers people do have in their house to clean the air, clean scent. So, I have a diffuser. I have lavender pillows, actually. I have the little sachets with lavender, and I have one under my pillow.
Nice.
Because the evidence that they've done on lavender is that when you smell lavender, they've put people in sleep chambers, and they have longer intervals and deeper sleep when they have lavender rather than when they don't. So, there is no harm in having a lavender pillow, or there's the pillow spray. But the point of the pillow spray, that smell disappears very quickly. So I prefer to have the sort of.
So and I have a sachet of dried lavender.
So the sort of thing your grandmother used to make, one of those.
Yeah.
And then in terms of in the study, when I'm really trying to focus on something, I diffuse rosemary, the scent of rosemary, because that affects a biochemical pathway that makes you more alert. But I also diffuse Japanese hinoki oil because all the evidence of it elevated natural killer cells, but I don't do it every day. Once a week, I'll just have a bit of that puffing away in the background. So there are these diffusers, and if you're going to if some people diffuse stuff all the time anyway, and they don't know what that's doing either. So we've also, I'd rather be diffusing stuff that I know from the clinical evidence will be good for you, but be with moderation, because I mean, it might be they're absolutely fine. I'm sure pinene is, actually, because they've taken it to very high levels and still not shown any detrimental effects. But it's like anything. It's no more different to putting a diffuser in your room to clean the air smell.
Because we're talking about diffusers, kind of like, I'm assuming you mean the ones where you put water in and it's the steam mixed with an essential oil, not the ones that you plug into the wall and it's got loads of chemicals. These are like I
worry about those ones. Yeah, I mean, I presume they've done the experiments, but you are just adding yet more smells and chemicals to the room.
Yeah, it's like cheap candles, like it's but actually having just steamed water. It's just steamed water with an essential oil is probably, I'd say, 10% of the ingredients that are in those kind of chemical candles and things like that. So the balance is a lot different to people who like candles and things like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and so that's certainly the case for me. I mean, if I bought one, I have a couple of those very cheap diffusers where you have a well of water, and I drop about 5 drops of oil in, and then it sort of puffs out for about 20 minutes. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm inspired.
I did that.
I'm very inspired.
I have one, and I did a lot just before, when I was pregnant, before I had George, because those smells to kind of help me sleep, and then to calm.
Yeah, it's very relevant. I'm quite heavily pregnant at the moment. I'm 32 weeks pregnant.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not sleeping that well. So I'm thinking lavender. Thinking lavender. But you mentioned actually a few kind of misconceptions that are abound. People can culturally make assumptions, and it just gets spread like, oh, of course you'll do exercise more if there's more green environment. But then scientifically, when you look at the data, that correlation's not really there. Yeah. Are there any more like that? Any kind of pet peeves or any misconceptions out there?
Pet peeves. I mean, one of my pet peeves is that biodiversity. I'm Professor of Biodiversity. I hate the term because people, first of all, don't know what it means. But obviously, it's the diversity of life around us. But particularly with plants, is that people, whenever you talk about nature, people put it in almost like a pretty butterfly, fluffy bunny bucket, and don't take it seriously. It's an add-on. It's a luxury. It's a luxury of the rich. And actually, we need housing. We need education. We need health. And the minute you bring those in, you can see my pet peeve makes me cross, and it does, because it's almost like you're being accused of, stopping someone from having a house because you're saying you can't put a house there because you're going to lose nature. I would never say that. We absolutely need more homes. We need good schools. We need, good health system. But in order to get those things, we have to also think about nature as part of that. And nature is not a luxury that we can just get rid of. And it's the first thing to go in a policymaker. Oh, we can move nature over there. It can go 30 miles away. No, it can't. Nature, we need to be near nature. Nature doesn't need us, but we absolutely need it. So we need to change that conversation. And even though I don't like saying this because it makes it sound very functional, we need to view nature as an infrastructure in the same way we view roads or railways or sewage systems. When you're thinking about planning a city or planning more housing, where's the nature going to go in that housing? That's what we need to be thinking. And if you haven't got space for green space, you can have a green wall. You can have green roofs. These are not expensive, but it just requires some thought. And in playgrounds, every child should be able to see out onto green. Every child. So right now we've got all this climate mitigation money coming in to sort of put up shading in playgrounds across the UK because of heat, stress that will come as a result of climate change. Though these are what we're looking at are metal poles with linen across the top or some cloth across the top. A tree would do that. Yeah. Why not put a tree up?
Yes.
Yeah. Or just like have some kind of climbing kind of
A pergola with
even
nice...
some ivy up the wall, it's fine.
Yeah.
It will have a huge impact on. And there's a lovely study. I know I'm throwing all these studies because this is the evidence base. But
Yes.
there was a study that was carried out in Spain a couple of years ago, published in a really top science journal. They looked at sort of 2,500 school children between the age of 8 and 11. And they mapped how much green space they had when they were walking to school. And they also mapped how much green space they could see, or how much green they could see from the classroom window. And they showed that the amount of, and then they looked at their test scores over that time, because you get, what they're showing is that if you look onto green and then go back to the task, you're much more focused and you do better. There are many studies showing that. And what they showed of these 2,500 children, that those that could see, it was much more important about the green in the playground than green on the way to school. And which is the opposite to what I would have thought, but that's what the data shows very strongly. And they said it's because children spend, 6 hours in school and it's looking out the window, which is the important bit. And then they also showed that, over this, it was a year study, that month on month that they tested them, those that could see the green did better and better.
Wow.
So with that sort of evidence base, you think, why are we still waiting, thinking, oh, well, it's expensive and someone's got to maintain them. I mean, anyone who has ivy growing up a wall of their house knows you don't need to maintain it.
Oh,
It will take over regardless. It can be a real pain. So there are plenty of Virginia creepers. I mean, there's plenty of plants that you can put that really require nothing but mean it turns an ugly concrete wall in a playground into something that is really, really valuable for the benefit of those children.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that you're not saying, it's not about priorities that this is now the priority. It's alongside, and it's actually something that is quite easy wins for not that much money.
Yeah.
The investment, buying a few plants, then they just look after themselves most of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, having to try all these things, and especially with the things with kids being distracted, with the window, I remember people stop looking out the window, you're being distracted.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the best thing for them.
We should all do it. It's this
6 hours.
mental mini break you get, and that adults and children, they show when you've stared out the window. I'm looking out my window right now. When you stare out the window onto something that's green, when you come back to the task, you've given yourself a mental mini break, and you do better at the task. You have less mistakes. You do it much quicker. I mean, so it's that sort of thing, or even you can have a forest scene as a screensaver on your computer. That will also trigger some of these, and within 90 seconds. This is really quick. It triggers it very, very quickly. Yeah. Whereas some people have screensavers, which is angular, it's a skyline. Don't do it.
An urban city.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So it can. So I mean, it'd be lovely if we'd all kind of get into a forest or have a beautiful, diverse garden to get into. But it doesn't have to be that level. It can literally be your screensaver. I mean, I'm a big fan of nice wallpaper.
Yeah,
maybe like big
mural, a big landscape
planty mural.
Yeah,
we have one of those planty murals in our kitchen.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really interesting, and I mean, some people. The gardening is obviously extremely good for us, and all the evidence, and we know that, and all that, it's been a number of years where people have shown how good it is for people. People garden because they like it. They don't garden because they think it's going to do me good. I mean, that's also very true. But the other thing that they've shown is actually with gardening, it's the front gardens that seem to have more health benefits than the back gardens, particularly for people who are in less well-off areas. So, a few pot plants in your front garden. And why they think it's because people are going in and out the front door all day. And whereas the back garden, you have to, if you have a garden at all. So even if you're living in somewhere like a block of flats, or you've got even just a little balcony or even a windowsill, you can put plants on there and get health benefits from doing so. And I think that's really important as well. It comes back to really, that pet peeve of this is just something for the rich. It's it's all well and good for you, but because you can bring about these changes with bringing nature into all these aspects of your life.
Yeah, amazing.
Can I ask one more thing just about, because I haven't got to this chapter about touch, because you said at the beginning in Kew Gardens, you walk through and he says do not touch, but some of those things are just too irresistible not to touch, like ferns and things like this. Yes. It's like because that's I was with my daughter today and she saw this moss, and we're about to have lunch, and I was in a restaurant, and she was like, about to touch it. I was like, just don't touch it just now because we're going to have to, but she did anyway.
Yeah.
And but she just couldn't help herself, like touching. She touches everything like that.
And its touch is another really interesting. The work on it is there's not that much work that's been done on touch, but the work, and actually most of the work that's been done is people who are designing like kitchen furniture. Now you think about, you go to a kitchen showroom, what do you see people doing? They're stroking the benches, aren't they? You almost like determining, anyway, well, they've shown, when people stroke pine wood, untreated pine versus oak versus marble, even if they're all the same temperature, when you stroke the pine wood, which is a bit knottier, a bit rougher, you get a lower blood pressure than the other two.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And it's like touching plants as well. Now, touching plants is another one, and you think about how many people you do. I go and I'll touch my house plants and touch the leaves, and I like to feel the different bark. Now, so there's something in there about this whole sense of touch, and yet we're quite happy with the idea of therapy dogs and stroking cats. I think there is almost certainly the same sort of responses that are invoked from the right plants. Again, you're not going to start touching the stinging nettle, are you? But so it's thinking about that and thinking about tending your house plants or tending something or stroking, and children do it naturally. They touch these things. I mean, moss. Yes, you think about touching moss. Even thinking about that, oh yeah, no, I get
it's
that.
Springy
Or
and soft.
And really, but I love ferns with those really big fronds. They've got a slightly rough feeling to them, don't they? There's something about them, and that the shape and the colour, so I can wax lyrical about plants, you probably realise.
I love it. I personally love touching grass. Like the kind of slightly dewy, take your shoes off, put your feet, put your hands on it. Like, I just love the feeling of grass
it does
that way.
This conversation is making me happy because everything you're saying, you can imagine it. And you're like, I can imagine that feels really good.
Yeah.
And we instinctively do it for our children, but not necessarily for ourselves. Just like, you instinctively want your child to sleep a lot, but you might not think about your own sleep so much. But yes, so I know people who, thinking about the nurseries they send their children to, and there's a local one that does a lot of forestry stuff, and everyone goes, oh, that's an amazing nursery because they're outside all the time, they're doing stuff in nature. So we all instinctively think that's obviously a good thing.
And that's the other thing. And when I wrote this book, some people said, oh well, we knew that already. Yes, you did, but it always gets pushed into the voodoo bucket. Voodoo science, it's all in the mind, and it's not real science. But if we're serious about prescribing nature as an alternative to prescription drugs, you need to treat our understanding in the science of what happens with nature in the same way as a prescription drug. What's the thing you're trying to treat? What's the nature you need to interact with? For how long? What's the mechanism of action? What's it do to us? What does it do to our blood pressure, natural killer cells? And then how the really critical thing, if you want to get economists and the Treasury involved in this and actually start doing this stuff properly, is to say, what are the cost benefits? And there are there are already some studies showing that when, you go and do sort of 3 sessions in a garden for 10 weeks, or you do cognitive behavioural therapy, they show that those that do the sessions in garden in this study, actually the effectiveness of getting people back to work after being off work from stress was similar. 18 months later, those who'd done the garden therapy, 70% of them were still at work compared to 50% who'd done the cognitive behavioural therapy. Now, I was really surprised by that. I thought it was the other way around, because I thought cognitive behavioural therapy, it's teaching you things to actually, mechanisms to cope with stress. And it's a fantastic therapy. I'm not, doing that down. But if there's a certain section where you can actually say this is as effective but much cheaper, so more people can do it, then we should really be looking at this seriously as a prescription. But right now, GPs, I feel very sorry for GPs. People say, oh yeah, send people into nature.
And
You wouldn't say just get them to take any drug, you know. So
Yeah.
it's sort of moving that framing of nature as well that we need to be thinking about.
And that's why you're doing such a fantastic job,
you
because
are.
you are bringing the science, the mechanisms, the
Thank you.
really nitty gritty understanding. So have you got any studies going on at the moment? What's kind of on the front lines for you?
Yeah. Well, one of the things in my lab in Oxford, one of the things I've been we've had funding from this Live Hume Nature Recovery Network. It's a big program across Oxford, which is fantastic. They're looking at how and where do you recover nature. So really positive. You know, if we're gonna recover nature in the UK, what do we need to do? So I lead the health part to that. So what do you need to do in terms of health? And so it comes back to it's very specific. Where should you tell people to spend time to get maximum calming if they're feeling stressed? And in the winter, of course, you might not want to go walk around the local park. You might not. So what we've been doing, we've been testing. We've done a number of studies now where we've put different groups of participants. They sit in the 7 glass houses of the Botanic Garden, because each glass house has a totally different smell profile. They all have roughly the same number of plants, and they do half an hour in each. And we've been testing using psychological metrics and also physiological heartbeat, heart rate variability, and an enzyme, salivary amylase, which gets elevated in stress. And we've started it with just students, and now we're moving on to a much more diverse population size. And sure enough, compared to sitting in the control room, which doesn't have any plants, all of the glass houses in the Botanic Garden, people have a significantly reduced psychological stress after half an hour.
Amazing.
And they also have lower heartbeat. Now, we haven't quite worked out the what's happening with the enzymes yet, because we didn't have big enough sample size. So we're now doing that. And the other thing we're just starting a project on, there's these things called Earthwatch have set up these tiny forests across the UK. They are like little community forests. There's 285 of those. And we're starting to work with citizen scientists to do the same suite of metrics to say, if you spend 20 minutes in a tiny forest versus 20 minutes not in that forest, is there a significant difference? Is this something you will get? And these are the health benefits you will get from doing this.
Wow.
So it's that sort of, it's providing the clinical evidence base that can then be used to really give a very detailed prescription.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so happy that someone like you is doing this.
Well,
it's really important and necessary, and especially with, houses being built everywhere, and it's a changing landscape.
But also everybody, the whole blood pressure, stress, everything in today's life that causes all those anti-inflammatory markers. If it's something so simple as a smell of pine and like a few houseplants, or a screensaver being like a landscape every so often.
Or a green wall, maybe they are quite trendy, but they'll become even trendier and commonplace.
But also then it's
houses.
like not making it trendy. It's actually like a, it's like, it's there for a reason. It's not, don't make it a trend, make it an essential.
Yeah, and every child should, doesn't matter if you're in an inner city school or out in the country, every child should be able to see green from their classroom window. Or have a few plants in the classroom. Let them play with soil. It doesn't have to be part of the curriculum, just have them there, and you will see the benefits. And to me that's such an important message. And we are, as I come back to, as I said at the beginning, we're really focused on what we eat right now and eating more plants. And I buy into that. I get it. But actually, what we really need to be doing is embracing plants much more in all our senses.
In our whole life. That's wonderful. So your book, Good Nature, where, first of all, where can people find it, and why should they buy it and read it? Where should they find it? They'll find it anywhere. Amazon, it's Waterstones. It's published by Bloomsbury. It's the first time I've ever gone. As an academic, I've published academic books with academic publishers, and I feel so passionately about this topic. And what the book does is it maps my understanding, the research I did to understand what goes on in our bodies when we smell, hear, touch, etc., the different senses of nature, and then how we build it into our own lives. So it really is about, it is a personal journey, and I've never written anything like it before, and it's just reinforced to me
my own career, in that I've always liked working outdoors in the environment, working on ecosystems, understanding climate responses to climate change. But I now realise it's not just the academic bit that was affecting; it was affecting my health and well-being as well. And I love being surrounded by nature.
And you can see that in your book, because you start off in these sections and they seem very scientific, and then through it you're like, and then my thoughts and this and that, and then it goes, and my takeaway is, and that, what we can all do. And it's such a nice kind of build. You get the science and the facts in there, then you get the thought provoking, that everyone's thinking, well, what is that? And then you get into the, this is what I can actually do at home, and this just shows and easy tips. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm pleased you like it that way and see it that way, because it is hard, because as a scientist you want to get the scientific facts out there. But also, what I did do in the book, I'd say I wrote down, but that made me wonder about this bit. So, and this was the leaf colour. I was thinking of green is good for us. And I think, well, hang on a moment. Why do I love going and walking in an autumn coloured park if that makes me angry?
It's nice, because that is what people will think. So it's such a an honest person's kind of journey through reading it. And it's,
And it's nice. And that's where a science-based book for kind of for everyone is I find more enjoyable to read than purely scientific articles, which don't really have a place for your own experience.
Yes.
They don't really want an academic to put in their own opinions. It's all fact. So I think the book is just a perfect mix of personality and science.
Well, thank you.
It's great.
Thank you. It's been a 5-year journey.
Wow.
And as I say, it's just that it's taken a long time to find the evidence and double check it and kick the tires and make sure I'm not just adding stuff that. So there are some things I'll say. The sample size is really small. This hints at being really important, but we cannot and must not categorically say this is what will happen, because we've got tiny. But I hope it just makes people think about their own lives and what they can do.
Absolutely. I'm sure it will. So how can people find out more about you potentially? Do you use social media or anything like that?
I don't, I just don't, because I just find all that really stressful.
Fair enough. It is. Fair enough. You don't have to use it.
So I don't tweet and I don't really do Facebook, but I have a website in the department. And if anyone wants to get in touch, they can just email me and I'll be really happy and I will reply.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll put those details in the show notes.
Thank you for that.
And also you probably have a university website that has links to all your published articles.
Yes, exactly.
So
and if you look it on Google Scholar, you'll find it on Google Scholar as well.
Yeah.
You just have my name and you can see all the stuff I've done over the years.
Thank you. Wonderful. So I think the main thing is our listeners should just pick up your book and read it.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I've got it on for presents for people as well. I know a lot of people who will enjoy reading it as Christmas
nice.
presents.
Oh, Christmas list. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Actually, it's a good idea. Yeah. So finally, this is kind of a broad question. It can be related with what you do. It can also be whatever you want to say. To you personally, what does health and happiness look like?
It looks like being outside. It looks like just going for a long walk with my dogs. That's what health and happiness looks like to me. And being surrounded with family and friends. And I think not looking too much at the news. Am I allowed to say that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have found there is a news site called Happy News. I don't know if anyone else knows about this, but I discovered it the other night when thinking, oh my goodness, I can't, this is sort of doomsday overload. And because so much of this stuff we can't do anything about, we can speak about, we can't do anything about. And that really, I find, can affect my own health and happiness. You just hear one thing after another and you think, oh my goodness. And actually there's an awful lot of good going on in the world. But we sort of, I don't know what it is, but somehow we seem to just be drawn to the dreadful stuff.
Negativity bias.
And so if you go out and you walk and you're outdoors, even in the park, and you're listening to the birds and you're looking at the green and you're looking at the flowers and everything else, you don't need to know what the species are. You're just there, you're surrounded by it, and it just makes you feel happy. It makes me feel happy.
You smile when you talk about it. Your face lights up.
That is a beautiful message. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This conversation has been amazing.
I've
you
really
so much.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
It's been lovely to talk.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
lovely.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so for now, we've had lots of time with you, and you're a busy, busy woman. So thank you so much. We love this conversation, and I'm sure, who knows, if you ever bring out another book, we'll get back in touch and we'll have
thank
you.
You. Thank you for having me. It's been really lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
And you.
Bye.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. So, what did you think?
We hope that you found that as interesting as us, and you've all got her book on pre-order or on order now.
Yeah, you're just logging onto your Amazon right now and going, Good Nature, must buy this book.
Oh, I honestly, yes, definitely. I said it's on Christmas gift list for me.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I have a thing, but I'm going to save it.
Weekly waffle.
Save it for the weekly waffle. I have a thing I want to say about
There's
it.
a teaser for you. You can't wait till Thursday now.
Oh, yes, definitely. But I will say I'm inspired.
Yeah.
I'm inspired. I'm going to invest in diffusers and all that stuff.
I'm definitely having more plants. More plants in the house. But we'll talk about that. But it's just, thank you, Kathy, for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're incredible. And the work you're doing is incredible.
I'm so happy someone is doing this, like I said to her, because it's really important. But like she said, it can be seen as an extra, like a luxury.
She's
on top
fighting
of
through
life.
barriers to do this as well, without being like, because people are like, it's not as important. She's like, actually, listen,
it
is, and she is the right person.
And here's the science. Here's the hard proof that it is so important for health, for children, for schools, for toddlers, for adults and workplaces, everyone. So we're going to chat more about this on Thursday for our weekly waffle. But for now, we really hope you enjoyed this episode, that you are left feeling inspired. And you can always get in touch with us any way you like.
Yes. Email,
Instagram, whatever.
Yeah.
If you have more questions for Kathy, you can also just ask those, because we have email contact with her. So we can easily ask and then answer your question on another episode.
Yeah. It'd be great to hear from you.
Yes. All right. Well, have a lovely day.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us on hello@healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
Or we'd love to connect with you on our Instagram, Facebook or TikTok pages.
You'll find the links to all our socials and more on our website, www.healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
And lastly, before you go, please give our podcast a rating and a review. It really helps others find us.
See you next week.
Bye.